This is Channel 4, and this is your Right to Reply.
Hello. To boldly go where no broadcaster has gone before. Whatever happened to science fiction on television?
I can remember in the early days after World War II, television sold television sets by putting on science fiction.
A Quatermass for the 90s would be heaven. That's exactly what we're after.
More from outer space later. Question Time came down to earth with a bump last week when its decision to include alternative comic Jo Brand on its panel was called into question. So did she provide an interesting alternative perspective on the issues of the day, or did her presence trivialise one of the BBC's premier political programmes?
On Question Time tonight, Secretary of State for Transport Brian Mawhinney, Labour Environmental Protection spokeswoman Joan Ruddock, Oxford Professor of Physiology Colin Blakemore, and writer and comedian Jo Brand.
Jo Brand on Question Time? Well, it's an alternative, but is it a good choice?
I feel a bit sorry for the Bishop of London, who described his sexuality as a grey area, because I think for most men their sexuality is a grey area. That's actually down to questions of personal hygiene more than anything else.
There are so few opportunities to put questions to those members of society who form part of the decision-making process: politicians, church leaders, trades unionists. In broadening the range of panellists on Question Time to include entertainers, the producers distance us just that bit further from those in society who should be publicly accountable. Getting straight answers to straight questions is what the programme does best. And even when the replies are not so straight, that too helps our understanding. Isn't that the whole point of the programme?
We want on the panel people who are articulate and hold strong views and are prepared to defend them and argue for them. That's what makes good programmes. So although we make no apology for the political nature of the programme, we still feel it's important to have politicians. We also feel that it's very important that they should be measured against the less predictable and a wider range of people, some younger. We put a lot of stress on having women panellists. We've usually had 2 in most programmes this time. And we knew that Jo Brand was a woman of strong opinions.
Gerry Adams meeting Bill Clinton, quite something. I'm fully expecting Gerry Adams to turn up on Question Time next week, but going on the basis that if you'll have me, you'll have anyone.
Are you trying to be controversial in order to boost the viewing figures?
Well, every television producer is keen on having good audience figures. But we would never put anybody onto the panel on Question Time just simply for the sake of sensation.
Question Time may be less than perfect in addressing complex questions in great detail, but to turn to it for entertainment does everybody a disservice. What I ask of it is that it informs me, furthers my understanding. In its selection of panellists, producers should focus on those talents.
Even news junkies may have overdosed this week on Who's News, Channel 4's season of programmes on how television news is owned and controlled. One face hardly off the news is Gerry Adams. Since the lifting of the government's broadcasting ban, interviewers are now free to grill Adams and others who were previously banned. But do they even toast him? At least one viewer believes that broadcasters are going soft on Sinn Féin.
A new Ireland, an agreed Ireland, which doesn't have the involvement of my Northern Protestant brothers and sisters, would not be the type of Ireland that I want to see.
Is the art of tough interviewing dead? Well, when TV presenters allow Sinn Féin spokesmen to peddle humbug like this, it certainly seems to be. When the broadcasting ban was lifted last September and Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness were given their own voices in the media, broadcasters assured the public that supporters of terrorism would be given the kind of tough grilling on the news that ordinary politicians have to undergo daily. Well, it's 6 months on and I see no evidence of tough television interviews with Gerry Adams. Channel 4 News and Jon Snow are not the only culprits here, but his interview with Adams last week was, I'm afraid, beyond the pale. It was more like a friendly chat than any exercise in journalism.
When it comes down to the question of disarmament, is there a role that the United States can play in this?
Well, I don't think that the US would even want to be involved in the minutiae of these matters. We're talking about demilitarization.
Adams twice equated IRA weapons with those of the RUC and the British Army, legitimate forces of the state. But there were no but surely challenges, as there would have been with constitutional Westminster politicians if they had been questioned on splits in Europe, for instance. And then Adams peddled his usual glib soundbite dig at John Major.
And the British Prime Minister, Mr. Major, should realise the opportunity that we have here. He should stop making excuses and he should start making peace.
As if John Major was the warmonger, the one who could restart the terrorist campaign. And Adams wasn't challenged. And then this.
Mr. Molyneux, for example, from the official unionists, is up for re-election, and that he's being challenged from a hardline quarter. What's your sense of what's happening? I mean, to some extent, surely, their position is becoming very difficult.
I think the broadcasters are overly eager to put people like Gerry Adams on a par with politicians who have always espoused peace. With his links to the still strongly armed IRA, Gerry Adams is an exception. He needs more, not less, incisive questioning. Surely we can expect our broadcasters to challenge Sinn Féin dogma whenever they hear it.
With me in the studio is disillusioned viewer Barbara Finney, and in her sights, Jon Snow, presenter of Channel 4 News. John, where was the grilling promised if the broadcasting ban was lifted?
Well, I certainly think Barbara has a very good and coherently argued point, and certainly the last question I didn't phrase well, but I think that what I was trying to do was to get Adams to understand that Molyneux was under pressure from people who didn't want a settlement. That was why he was challenged. As far as the sort of challenging grilling, I certainly did not intend to challenge or grill him, because what we wanted was information. Why is Sinn Féin not part of the process?
But you're not getting information. You're not informing the public. You allow him to get away with his comments about his electoral mandate. You don't inform the public that that electoral mandate is virtually non-existent.
Well, there are two things here. One is that in the interview, I think, in fact, we got the first really coherent and clear picture of what Sinn Féin's problem with the process is. He equates decommissioning of arms with demilitarisation. Now, the interesting thing is that although the British government disagree with him, he wants the whole of the province demilitarised, don't we all?
Yes.
Now, the British government is in fact demilitarising unilaterally. As we speak, they have just pulled all the troops off the streets. There are to be no further...
They are not...
That's demilitarisation. There are to be no further patrols at all, day or night.
I don't think we ought to get into the politics necessarily. Where involved here is in the way in which people are interviewed. And there is an expectation that you should be grilling somebody like Gerry Adams. And indeed, you said to the Independent newspaper, John, in the autumn, about talking to John Major, I noticed that your job was, quote, to leave him lying all over the floor. You didn't leave Mr. Adams exactly horizontal, did you?
No, I mean, and I'm not quite sure that that is what I said, but if that's what they said, I said I'm happy to travel with it. But
well,
I don't think it's really... I don't think it's our job, in fact, to leave anybody lying all over the floor. We're in a very, very interesting and important moment in the process. It is quite clear the British government is very keen to talk to Mr. Adams, and that Mr. Adams is very keen to talk to the British government. And we're trying to find out what is the hair that splits them at the moment. I mean, it seems to me we are in a really, really interesting point that nobody needs grilling over this. What we need to try to find out is what is actually happening and what's the problem.
The point here seems to be John is saying it should be a straightforward news interview and he should treat Gerry Adams as he'd treat anybody else. You're saying there should be a difference. Why?
Well, for a start, he doesn't treat Gerry Adams as he does everybody else. I mean, he certainly doesn't treat him the way he treats cabinet ministers. But he should not be treating him even as well as he treats them, because he is actually backed by arms. And when you put the question to him about the arms, he immediately says, oh, well, I'm only a politician. I do not have arms.
But
if you cannot speak to him about the arms, why do you speak to him at all?
Well, where I part company with you is that I think we're now in a completely different circumstance from the one under which the ban operated. Then he was linked with active terrorism. Now he's part of a peace process to which many Protestant gunmen are also party.
But the point is, we cannot have any sort of democracy until the guns are got rid of. That is the fundamental thing.
But that's accepted by everybody.
Yeah, but Gerry
Mr.
Adams says he can do nothing about removing the guns. So
I don't accept that. He's not said that.
Well, yes, he did.
Hold on.
No, he's not said that.
Again, this is about how the interviewing is done. And can I put to you, John, isn't there a danger? We've now got here a media star with a sort of a glamour attached to him, which at root is because of his association with violence.
No, I don't think, oddly enough, the glamour, if you want to put it like that, is associated with his relationship with violence. I think it's associated with the extraordinary transformation of what's happened in Northern Ireland. And Gerry Adams is amongst a number of people who've made a difference in Northern Ireland. I mean, that is inescapable. He may have had a relationship with people with arms, and he may have had a relationship with violence. But the fact of the matter now is that you and I, are speaking in the atmosphere of peace that you've not known in 25 years, that I've not known.
But it was Gerry Adams and the people who supported him who caused the war. Now, they have actually stopped the violence. But the whole point is that Gerry Adams would just be a nobody politician if he had not been linked to the violence.
Barbara,
you would not have interviewed him at all.
Barbara, one last question. Next time Jon Snow interviews Gerry Adams, as he surely will, how do you want him to do it?
I want him to expose him as what he is, a nobody without the violence.
But that's not my job. I'm not here to expose anybody as nobody. What I'm here to do is to let you see Gerry Adams for yourself.
But we don't
You
see
decided
the real
all
Gerry
these
Adams.
things as a result of looking at him on the telly.
All we had was not an interview, it was a party political broadcast on behalf of Sinn Féin.
Well, I think we'll have to hold it there, knowing full well Jon Snow won't agree. After the break, was it comic relief or chronic relief?
Where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
It's one to remember. All area codes starting O must start 01 from phone day the 16th of April, so start using them now.
From around £10,500, the Golf L. It comes with power steering, immobiliser, just in case someone should try and make off with it. Driver's airbag, because you never know what's round the next corner. And 2 years free service and maintenance. Not that a Golf takes much looking after, of course.
Preparing for that first day at school is something most people understand.
I remember my first day at school.
You got everything? Football boots, pencil case. Oh, your hair's all sticking. All right.
Get off, Mum.
Let's go.
But money matters are rarely that predictable. Anytime you want advice, pop into Abbey National.
It'll be all right.
No hard sell, no flashy suits, no strings attached, but bright thinking and sensible solutions very much attached.
This is it.
We'll help you prepare for anything from the expected to the unexpected.
Good morning. I'm Mrs. Maynard.
We don't guarantee lifelong happiness.
I remember my first day at school.
So do I.
It was diabolical.
Language, George.
But we do promise something you won't find anywhere else.
Happiness.
Is your motor insurance premium too high? The Prospero Direct Premium Watch system has already saved money for thousands of careful drivers. Call us now on 0800 74 75 76. Those drivers who took out a policy saved, on average, 25%. That's equivalent to £73. Call Prospero Direct on 0800 74 75 76 to see how much you could save. Because our premium watch system now suggests that around 7 million other careful drivers could benefit from our lower premiums. To find out how much you could save, call Prospero Direct free on 0800 74 75 76 for a no-obligation quotation. Jack the Lad need not apply, but we're waiting to take your call on 0800 74 75 76 now.
Welcome back. It's National Science Week. Lots of science fact on television, but what about science fiction? Recently, the BBC has been winning plaudits for its costume dramas, with Middlemarch and Martin Chuzzlewit nominated for BAFTAs. But is too much of its drama based in the past? Last Saturday, Sky One launched a brand new space drama made by Gerry Thunderbirds Anderson. Space Precinct promises plenty of special effects and explosions. But viewer Gavin Cook wants the broadcasters to put down their ray guns and put more effort into producing serious science fiction drama.
If you go into any bookstore and check out the sales figures for science fiction literature and the lavish displays of science fiction books, you can see that the genre is hugely popular. At the cinema, science fiction films are among the highest earning movies of all time.
Yet where is the popularity of science fiction reflected on our television screens? It isn't. I don't believe there's been an intelligent British science fiction serial in over 30 years.
What, say the BBC? What about Doctor Who or Blake 7? Wonderful small screen examples of the genre, triumphing over their minuscule budgets. Wrong. These series were science fantasy, cops and robbers in space. Doctor Who's role was essentially that of a space policeman, clearing the galaxy of baddies like this, wrapped in silver foil.
You will accompany us.
Sorry, mustache.
And in Blake 7, our heroes were the rebel travellers, intensely proud of their plastic and cardboard ship.
With a ship like this and a full crew, then we can start fighting back.
I spoke to John Clute, editor of the Encyclopedia of Science Fiction, about the difference between these space operas and serious science fiction.
Television space opera, I think, is dominated by visuals. It's dominated by the gear, the TARDIS, the spaceship, the ray gun, everything of that sort, which does not dominate written science fiction. Written science fiction is about ideas. It is a set of arguments.
Why do you think that broadcasters tend to assume that science fiction is primarily for a younger audience?
Broadcasters, like most people who don't read SF, are totally ignorant of the virtues and faults, to be honest, of genuine SF. So they tend to think that because what they do is follow the lead of their special effects people, and as children love special effects and are not too worried about the darker or the more significant or the more urgent problems and opportunities that science fiction addresses in written form, therefore they allow themselves to think that SF is just sci-fi, the gear, the splash, the pizzazz.
There's great science fiction material there to be dramatised.
Works by Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke and John Brunner. Classics acknowledged not only within the genre, but throughout the world of general fiction. And why doesn't the BBC televise the work of a great unsung British author like Brian Aldiss? Greybeard and his latest, Somewhere East of Life, are eminently televisual because their essence is drama, not high-tech.
Somewhere East of Life envisages a future where people's memories can be stolen by a process known as EMV, then sold off to voyeurs in the form of bullets, which they can then play back in their own minds.
The hero, Burnell, has had 10 years of memory stolen and searches in a bootleg bullet shop for memory traces of his wife, Stephanie.
If I had my memory of Stephanie back, thought Burnell, would I not be retrieving an old grief, of which at present I know nothing? He forced himself to go on seeking through the illegal bullets. He tried the next one. He lived through a 6-day voyage over a great reef, where he scuba dived. The voyage ended with a huge party on a small island. Here he took part in a moonlight orgy. Then he was a witless brute of a man, living in an apartment in a bleak township where snow lay thick. Among horrendous drunken bouts and fights came an exhilarating drive over tundra to shoot reindeer. While they lasted, these memory episodes were as real to Burnell as memories of his own life. They filled his brain. He came out of them exhausted.
I asked Brian Aldiss whether broadcasters sometimes lacked imagination when considering dramatising science fiction.
Their main handicap is this, that they have a preconceived idea of what science fiction should be. They think of it as a thing apart. The term science fiction gives them the heebie-jeebies. They actually hate it, or rather, they hate what they think it is. And so the top brass never want to give support to it.
It's been very difficult to make science fiction for television in the recent past because Hollywood has spent so much money on making incredible science fiction films. The money on the special effects budgets would keep the BBC going for a year in all its drama. We can't compete, so we've had to find another way forward. The X-Files actually does that. The X-Files isn't terribly expensive, and it's doing wonderful business on BBC Two. Because it delves into the unconscious, it delves into people's fears and anxieties. And if you can tap that within a contemporary setting, so you're not spending a fortune on special effects, then you've really cracked what good science fiction should be.
As we see from our screens, most of the science fiction that they show is a kind of technological parody. This is where I think they go wrong, that they think it's all about Star Trek. They don't think that there might be something that you could call a serious science fiction novel that might be put on with the same delicacy with which you put on, I don't know, Middlemarch.
I think people have been frightened of taking any risks at all, actually, in drama. And science fiction has been one of the casualties of that. But the good news is that both controllers now are actively seeking it. So we hope to present something very soon.
Science fiction is a literature of prophecy and imagination, ideally suited to focus on contemporary issues like overpopulation, genetic engineering, or global warming, posing, on behalf of us all, the big question, what if? It's high time what's been called the true literature of the 20th century was given a fair shake on television.
I still tremble at the memory of Quatermass in the Pit, which I watched behind the sofa. Tomorrow is Mother's Day. Whatever you do, don't forget it. But some mums are upset about the current Brookside storyline, which they feel paints a damaging picture of single mums.
Brookside has a great reputation for controversial storylines. But the recent storyline about single mother Sarah has served only to reinforce the widespread, unsympathetic misconceptions about young single mothers. And as someone who spent 5 years as a single parent myself, I speak from experience. I've been really disappointed by the portrayal of Sarah as idiotic and feckless. She seems desperate to trap the nearest man, Mike Dixon, as a substitute father for her daughter, Rebecca.
You can't be being on your own, can you? You know, just the three of us.
What?
Oh, made up you want to get a place with us. And hey, we both got time off, so why don't we have a look at some flats later?
Not today, like.
Yeah.
It was so insulting and unrealistic when she referred to Mike as Uncle Mike. It sounds more like a line from a 60s kitchen sink drama than from a hard-hitting 90s soap.
What is it?
Look, it's us three. Mummy and Uncle Mike. Oh, our own little family. Clever girl.
It's about time that Brookside let its writers and producers back out into the real world again. It's obvious that they're losing touch with reality.
Comedy is no laughing matter. Comic Relief raised a bundle for charity, but was it a bundle of laughs? Adrian Leach takes the mickey.
Comic Relief has had its day, and we really need to find other ways for the common man to cleanse his soul. The idea of Comic Relief is a noble one, but that nobility is being destroyed by the lack of originality and the tired approach of those who present it. Cue Johnny.
Well, he does it a bit differently, but you get the idea.
Some of the celebrities on Comic Relief seem to have overdosed on too much self-importance. That or too many Annika Rice treasure hunt videos. One good example is Lenny Henry's dash to the waiting RAF aircraft.
Come on, we've got to go. Look at
All of these people did groundbreaking work in alternative comedy during the 80s. No one more so than Lenny Henry. But these people should not be allowed to rest on their laurels. The Sun's Gary Bushell has also been a firm critic of Comic Relief.
I'm not knocking Comic Relief at all. I mean, I think as a charity they do a great job. It's just as entertainers they let us down. I mean, 6 hours and the laughs are few and far between, aren't they? They do for comedy what Alf and Audrey Roberts do for Marriage Guidance. And you have to ask as well, why only this charity gets this sort of this prime time promotion from the BBC?
A lot of people did a lot of hard work fundraising. And yet we're expected to part with our hard-earned cash, persuaded by comedians who donated their services free. And after all, it is for charity. So they thought they could come up with any old garbage and it would be all right. Perhaps it's not compassion fatigue that the charities need to worry about, but sanctimonious celebrity fatigue.
The BBC wouldn't give us an interview, but John Ploughman, head of comedy entertainment, gave us this statement. I would like to thank the millions who watched and the millions who gave millions. Thank God they're not all as mean-spirited as your viewer, or as mean-spirited as Mr. Ploughman. Sex, sex and more sex. That's what a lot of you expected from Channel 4's Red Light Zone. But as they say, it's not the quantity that counts, it's the quality. Did the earth move for you?
Channel 4's Red Light Zone is an opportunity to provide, in the words of their own publicity, a unique and challenging zone of programming aimed at an adult audience. For me, only a few of the programmes really did achieve that aim. Ladyboys, about teenage Taiwanese transvestites, was an inquiry into an unusual aspect of sexuality which came closest to reflecting that ambition. But more often, these attempts to reflect and inform upon the subject of sexuality tend to slide into an excuse for soft pornography. NYPD Nude was the worst offender, based on a New York female cop who took her clothes off for Playboy. Big deal. I wasn't shocked, but I was disappointed. With so much viewing time, it really could have been an in-depth study into why sexuality has become such a big industry. Come on, Channel 4, a bit more substance and a bit less surface.
Right to Reply is going to be looking back at the Red Light Zone at the end of its run. So let us know what you think. You can write to us at our address, which is coming up in a moment. Whatever you've seen on whichever channel, satellite, terrestrial, the Beeb or ITV, we cover them all. Whichever way, keep in touch and join us next week. Goodbye.
Thursday at 8, Hardmen witness the glistening bodies of Glasgow's best.
I knew it was going to be good, but I didn't think it was going to be that good.
At 8:30, Food File, organic meat. Are you always getting what you pay?
Oh.